wrestling, gumbo to grits, politics to poetry, and all things Southern in between, this is Take on the South. Produced by the Institute for Southern Studies in the McCausland College of Arts and Sciences at the University of South Carolina, Take on the South explores the highs and lows of the American South, examines the truth and fictions of the country's most distinctive region, and picks the brains of some of its most accomplished students. To understand the South, you need to take it on, and that's what we'll be doing. Join us as we take on the South.
Welcome to Take on the South, the podcast of the Institute for Southern Studies at the University of South Carolina. I'm Matt Simmons, the Assistant Director of the Institute, and I will be your host today. I am over the moon excited to have a chance to do an interview with a man named Mark Morrow. Tell me how to slur it just right.
Well, it's just Morrow.
Morrow, okay.
Yes.
Right.
So a lot of people say marrow.
Okay.
You know, and half the time I just don't correct them.
Very good. But Mr. Morrow has a really wonderful art exhibit, photography exhibit, currently on display here at the Koger Center for the Arts here in Columbia on the campus of USC, running right now up until, when is the end of the exhibit?
November 21st.
November 21st. And I went to the grand opening of this exhibit on Wednesday night, just night before last. And I walk in, and the first thing I see is this amazing photograph of probably my favorite writer of all time, Peter Taylor.
Oh.
Just there with his tie wonderfully askew as he always wore it. Absolutely, putting out a cigarette, just told a story into itself. And then I sat there and listened to you talk about your photography and these stories, and I said, I need to interview this man. And so that's what we're doing here today. Have a wonderful chance to interview Mr. Morrow about this wonderful project he's done, about his work, about his art, about his writing. But before I do that, you and me were just chit-chatting before we started filming here about you growing up in Greer, South Carolina.
I did.
And you were saying, growing up then, as you were doing in the early 1960s, now you're facing the fact that you can get sushi.
Yes.
In downtown Greer, and beyond that, you can get liquor in downtown Greer now, and this is just a completely bizarre thing.
It is a bizarre thing. That is true. And I'm hoping that that's true about getting sushi. I believe that is true, but as we know, as I said last night, the truth is relative, and if it adds to the story, then it's probably okay to use it. Yes.
And this is another thing I wanted to interview you about, because you said something. You and I had never met before Wednesday night, but you said something Wednesday night that are the exact words that have come out of my mouth countless times.
Yeah.
Which is, you should never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Yes.
And I said, man, this fella's a kindred soul here, right? So let's before we start telling good stories, let's just have the truth some, or at least, well, I was just teaching my literature students a short story from the very end of William Gilmore Sims's life, the last short story he published, which has as a frame narrative a bunch of hunters sitting around telling stories around the campfire after a hunt, and the master of ceremonies puts on deer antlers, and he calls himself the Big Lie, and he has to. And the thing is, you have to tell a good lie, right?
Oh, okay.
So and how lies and the truth all get together. But let's not tell a big lie yet. If a few small ones creep in for the sake of the story, that's fine. But why don't you tell me about how you became a photographer? You mentioned some the other night about you've been doing this since high school. So
yes.
Growing up in Greer, how did photography start for you?
Well, I graduated from the journalism school in 1975.
Here at Carolina.
Yeah, and I worked for my high school newspaper.
Okay.
I was, for some reason, I was the sports editor. I had rather, watch paint dry than go to sports events. I'm just not much of a sports guy.
Sure.
But it was, and in fact, my first job as a journalist, when I graduated in '75, when there was not a lot of jobs, really, was as a sports editor of a small newspaper up near my home in Greer. I didn't do well at that job. Yeah, but and I also wrote other things, but it's so I did work for my high school newspaper, and of course I worked for the Gamecock when I was here, and in high school I took a lot of sports pictures because that was the main thing, football and basketball and baseball, and so that's what I did. So that's kind of where I got interested in photography, but I didn't major in photography at USC. A number of my friends did, but that was not my interest. It was journalism, and of course it was the time of Bob Woodward and Watergate, and obviously I thought I was going to go change the world.
Yes.
Which was harder than I thought to do.
So you were interested, and sounds like you wanted to become a journalist, do the writing side of things. Find out. We've been joking about lies, but find out about the truth of the thing and display that, right?
Yes, yeah. It's and I always illustrated my stories, if and it's somewhat ahead of the time, because once the iPhone came out, all of a sudden the reporter was also the photographer.
Yes.
That was when the iPhone became better than cameras. There was a lot of unemployed photographers later on. So, but I always just did both because it was they were both. I guess I was a true photojournalist.
Yes. So there in high school, you're starting to take photographs, for your high school, football team or high school newspaper. What was your first camera?
I probably used the camera that the school had, which was an old Rolleiflex. Okay. You look down like that. Yes. It's got the twin lens thing. I know they had one of those, but eventually I got a 35 millimeter.
Okay.
I developed film in I grew up in a very, very small little house in Greer, and it had one bathroom, and so I would develop film in my bedroom, at night, when it was dark, and I had a small enlarger, and I just learned how to do this from a very early age. Yes.
Wonderful. So you're doing that. You come here to USC. You study journalism.
Yeah.
You think you're going to write and tell the truth of these things and go and change the world, a la, Woodward and Bernstein. And those fellows. And then, what do you do after graduation then?
Well, after I graduated, I worked for the Gaffney Ledger.
Okay.
Where I was a sports writer, as I said.
Can't get away from sports.
No, that was my first job. That didn't quite work out, so I came back to Columbia, and I worked at the State for a little bit, and then I went back to my. I got an offer to work in my hometown newspaper, the Greer Citizen, and so I went back to Greer to my hometown newspaper, which I guess because I started at the bottom at the State, and I was never going to be able to write anything, so I went back to my hometown newspaper, and in my first year, I won a South Carolina Press Association award for photography and feature writing.
Oh, wonderful!
And so that year, I went to the award ceremony and ran into Emily Bull, who was the editor of the Island Packet in Hilton Head.
Okay.
And at that point, I had decided to, eventually go back to graduate school.
Okay.
And so over the summer, it was like 4 months, I left the Greer Citizen, and I went to Hilton Head. And I had a great time. And I was a photographer there. And then I won a feature photography award for the Press Association that year. And the packet was owned at the time by the Raleigh News Observer.
Okay.
And they offered me a job based on my work there as a photographer for the Raleigh News Observer. But I decided that I wanted to go back to, study fiction.
Yes.
With
Fiction writing.
Fiction writing here with Bill Fox. So that's what I did. So I came back here.
So you came back here to do masters
In English, and that's where I met Bill and James Dickey, and Bill and I became very good friends. And so Bill is sort of I guess he's the person that sort of encouraged me.
Okay.
And the story I always tell about Bill, and it's in my book here, is I'd been studying with him about a year and a half, and we, like I said, I was friends with him. I house sat for him, and I took. There was this writer series that happened between 1979 and 84, and I guess Bill and Dickey, they knew everybody, and so that's they got Kurt Vonnegut here, they got
Toni Morrison, Seamus Heaney.
Yeah, they got everybody here. But one of the first people they got here was Tom Wolfe of
yes,
electric Kool-Aid acid test. So
And white suits.
And so. I did that. The first portrait in this exhibition is of Tom Wolfe. The stark photograph of him, staring intently at the camera. And I think I shot it at the ETV studios. I didn't really have much equipment. I never did have much equipment. I didn't use very much equipment, like lights and all that sort of thing. And so. I shot this photograph, and of course Bill liked it very much. I showed it to him, and then I also was doing some local photography. So I photographed Willie Nelson in his tour bus for some little local magazine that lasted about a week. It was a kind of a startup, but Bill liked that as well. Then he asked me to photograph his son Colin Fox, who is actually a fiction editor in New York City now, and I think it was probably for a like a birthday present or something for his wife Sarah, and he loved that too. And they were all they were great portraits. So we were having a beer one night, and he just said to me, Mark, you've been studying with me for a while. And he said, I just have to tell you, I think you're a much better photographer than you are a writer.
How about that?
And so I said, okay, Bill, that's disappointing, but okay, let's do that. So I'll start with you. I know you. And that's the only person I knew in the world was Bill Fox and James Dickey.
Well, so it seems like this is how this whole thing starts. Here you are, a small-town guy who ends up just doing the high school thing. Mm-hmm. You then decide you want to be a journalist because that's what's in the air, that's what's in the water here in the early 1970s. And you come study journalism, you graduate, and then you have a relatively successful, young career in a lot of small town and medium-sized city newspapers. And then you say, well, I want to get back to writing because I've always loved that.
Yep.
You come here, you study with Dr. Bill Fox in the late 1970s. This is this amazing moment here on USC's campus. We're bringing some of the most significant writers in the 20th century here to our campus. You get a chance to meet these people, photograph them, and then your mentor says, I know you've been studying fiction writing with me, but you should go take more photographs.
Yes, right.
And that, it seems, is kind of what began the project that results in this book here, Photographing Southern Writers, which is the main part of the collection. The photographs in here are the main part of the collection.
That's right.
That's on exhibit there in the Koger Center. Well, you told an amazing story about how this book and the travels about this book began.
Right.
And it all began with what we were joking about a few moments ago.
Yeah.
This thing that was a lie, but also kind of true in a letter you wrote to a certain doctor living in Covington, Louisiana.
Yes. Well, as I said, I didn't know anybody at all. Obviously famous, but my strategy, and of course this is the strategy of naivete. That if I figured if I could photograph the most famous writers, then the rest would be kind of easy. You know? Yeah. I mean, you start at the top. I mean, it's a way to be successful.
It is.
Yeah, really.
It is.
Become a rock star, and then you can go down.
Everything else falls into place.
It just falls into place. I just thought that made a lot of sense to me.
Absolutely.
So I sort of was practicing. So I did Tom Wolfe, and then I did. What else did I do next? We'll have to see. Yeah, and I shot Bill Fox in his classroom, and then that's in the show. And he used that photograph for years. He's sitting. If you remember Bill Fox, he was just this gregarious, funny, storytelling kind of guy. He was just great. And he's like leaning against his chalkboard, and just this Chester grin on his face, and it's just a great photograph. And he used that on Dixie Anna Moon and lots of other books. And then I used those contacts, the contacts from that I made, like Tom Wolfe. So I wrote letters. One of the interesting things about this whole project, and it could not happen now, is because everything was a letter. There was no email.
Sure.
So
this is what 1980, 81, something like that?
No, Tom Wolfe is the 79.
Okay.
And then, so I would write. You would write letters to these people, and you could say almost anything because they couldn't go on the internet and say, "Are you telling me the truth?"
Yes.
So the story you're referring to. Walker Percy was one of my He was one of my literary heroes.
Yes.
And so I had photographed. I photographed him, and let's see. I think the first time was, December. I think it was December of 1979.
Okay.
So before I photographed him, I had made some other contacts. So I photographed Reynolds Price.
Oh yeah.
Reynolds Price.
Yeah, amazing.
And then I photographed Guy Owen, another North Carolina photographer. And I'm not sure that William Styron was speaking in that year. This is 1979. William Styron. And then I think Bill knew Harry Crews.
Oh, I need to ask you about Harry.
Yeah, so I went down and photographed Harry Crews in Gainesville, right? So I'm building this little body of work, right? And so with that little body of work, then I would send these folks like a 5x7, right, and say, I've already photographed this person, this person, this person.
Sure.
Would you like to be part of this book? So it was this kind of a iterative sort of thing that I was doing.
So were you intending to create a book initially, or was it just you're just
I
photographs?
I was going to. The idea was to create a book of Southern writers.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
And so. Because the writer series was happening from 79 to 84 as well, so all the writers who were coming through here, I was also photographing.
I understand.
Yeah. So I was getting, because I really wasn't a portrait photographer, I just sort of taught myself how to do this.
Oh, wow.
And so.
That's impressive because, I mean, these are really impressive photographs, and I really want to encourage everybody to, pick up the book, but really go see them in person because I know the work of 80% of the writers that you photographed over there. And there's something where when I'm looking in these photographs,
right,
like I'm seeing something, and maybe it's just my sort of eisegetically reading their work onto the photograph.
Right.
But, the photograph you take of Doris Betts,
oh, yeah,
it looks like a Doris Betts novel. Like, it just does. It has that sort of feeling there.
It does.
Right?
It does.
And so that's where you say you just kind of were self-taught as a portrait photographer.
Yes,
This is amazing that you're able to tell those stories then.
I really didn't even know what I was doing, I was really practicing on these people, especially the beginning.
Yes.
I didn't really know too much about lights, and because journalism photography is mainly triax, and you're taking pictures of people on and all kinds of lighting situations. It's not controlled, and all that sort of thing. But this is much more controlled sort of thing. Any case, so I thought it was time to like move up, move up my game and say, okay, now I'm gonna go for Walker Percy. So I wrote him this letter. I think it was August 31st, 1979, and I just basically told him that I had a contract with Viking Press to do this book.
Now, was that true?
That was totally, I just made it up.
I love that so much.
But I mean, what was true is that I had been to New York. I had met this editor, and Bill
You worked for Viking?
Yeah, she was a senior. She was a senior at Viking, and she liked these pictures. I didn't have like this huge portfolio. I just had what I had taken thus far, and she and also the Willie Nelson photograph, which Bill. And so at the same time, there was this writer, Pete Axum. He was doing a book on Willie Nelson, so they had suggested they might use it in this book as well. But my letter to Percy said, I'm doing this book for Viking Press, and I'm also doing working with Pete Axum, this famous writer, on his Willie Nelson book. I was just making this stuff up. It's like ridiculous. And it's not the internet world. But they
can't verify.
I mean, they can't verify it. And I'm using Bill's name, so I guess I'm telling the truth. Anyways, so I wrote that letter, and he wrote me back and said, his letter is very fun. It's in the book. I reprinted a lot of these letters in the book. But he basically said, no way. He was absolutely not going to do it. And I remember he said, Jill Kremitz wanted like 3 days. She's famous for that. Jill Kremitz is a photographer of authors, and she was married to Kurt Vonnegut. And I had met Kurt Vonnegut at another party. He was here for something, and I had met him and Jill Kremitz, so I knew them. So I wrote him right back, and I said immediately, and I said, well, I tell you what, Jill Kremitz may take 3 days, but I guarantee I can do it in 10 minutes.
There you go.
And he said yes.
Fantastic.
And I went down, and so I arranged to photograph him, like in the after Christmas, December '79. But at the same time, I was working on Tennessee Williams, because I thought, okay, I should see if I can get Tennessee Williams. That would be a good start, and if I can send pictures of Tennessee Williams to the rest of these authors, they'll say, sure, I'm serious. I'm a serious person. Yes. So I had met George Plimpton through the writer series, and so I wrote Plimpton and said, I want to do this. I'm doing this book, and I don't know I forgot what I said to him, and he gave me Tennessee Williams' agent's name, and it turned out that his agency was International Creative Media, which is the same as James Dickey's.
Oh, yeah.
So then I asked James Dickey.
So Dickey was here at USC.
Dickey was at here. So I asked Dickey if he could help me with this, and Dickey did. And eventually I got Tennessee Williams' phone number, and I called him up, and he said, come on down. So I flew down to Key West, the week before I went to see Walker Percy. So I went to photograph Tennessee Williams in Key West, and then went to New Orleans and spent the day with Walker Percy.
Fantastic.
Around that same time.
All these wonderful. See, you just gotta just fake it till you make it.
Fake it.
This is
it.
what I tell my 7-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just fake it till you make it. But at the same time, I was working at the university at the time.
Sure.
I was working as a medical photographer for the brand new USC School of Medicine.
Okay, so photographing cadavers is much different than photographing.
Well, it was more of photographing classes and
Okay.
and making slides and just general photography. So that was my daytime job. So
Yeah.
I was doing all this on the weekends in between, and the letters that I wrote, I made it sound as if I had some budget. So I would say, yes, I'll be happy to fly to Canada or California. And I didn't have any money, I was just.
Wow. Well, let me ask you some stories about some of these writers.
Yeah.
There are a couple in particular I want to ask you about, and a couple of them you've already mentioned. One, let's hear the Tennessee Williams story, because the photograph you have of Tennessee Williams is wild.
Yeah.
Right? So let's describe the photograph, and then if you don't mind, and maybe let's hear the story about how that photograph came to be.
Okay, well, like I said, I was a little intimidated, thinking, because I was at that point I wasn't that confident about what I was doing, and so I showed up and he was still in bed. We had an appointment like at 10 o'clock or something. He was still in bed, and his assistant, he lived on Duncan Street. I'm sure it's it's a small little cottage there, and I think it's his sister Rose, right, who was mentally ill. He was still taking care of her. In fact, we drank a bottle of wine out on under this gazebo on that property, and then at some point he said, "Well, I have to go see Rose."
Okay.
So I thought, at the time I thought, that is so wild, this is very, it doesn't seem real that I'm talking to Tennessee Williams about his sister.
Yes.
So anyway, so I'm waiting around, and he finally wakes up, and he says, his assistant goes in and says, I'm here for the photograph, and he says, well, tell him I want to be photographed in my bed, and I was too stupid to go, that's not going to work, I just said, sure. So I dragged my camera and my one little light. I just used a single light and one little strobe in there, and I set it up in the dark. And then his assistant turned on the light, and there he was sitting in this kimono, was kind of falling off his shoulder, and and all his medicines are in the background. His phone's off the hook, and
How does the dog end up in the photograph?
well, he said, take my picture. I said, okay, fine. I took some, maybe 4 or 5 pictures, and then he said to his assistant, he says, go get Queenie. That was the name of his dog. And he said, a queen for a queen.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, he said to me. And so, the dog came running in, jumped on the bed, and they started playing with each other, playing and roughhousing around. And I just took a couple of shots while he was roughhousing with the dog. And I thought, well, this picture's never going to be used, because all the others are more formal. And,
Yes.
this one is very informal, but it seems to work.
It seemed to capture the essence of who he is.
Yeah. And then I did take some more pictures outside. He was wearing some kind of polyester Nehru jacket. I don't know. It looked like he got it at Goodwill or something. But
He might have.
He might have. They weren't near as good as the other one. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
Well, let's stay in Florida then. You mentioned Harry Cruz
Yeah.
a while ago. When you photographed him, did he yet have the tattoo that said with the E. Cummins quote on it. How do you like your blue-eyed boy now, Mr. Death? Right?
No.
You know, did he yet have that tattoo on the side of his head? Right.
No, no.
So you know, he's an intimidating just person, right? Personality is his
He
presence.
is.
So
Yeah.
what was it like photographing Harry Cruz?
Well, yeah, you know, the picture of him. In fact, that picture was used in July in Harper's Magazine.
This previous July.
This previous July. I don't know how they found out that. You know, I don't know if someone did some research or something. But anyway, they came up with this photograph, and so they called me and they used it and it was a long essay about his memoir, which
Childhood,
is
which is amazing book.
Yeah, it's an amazing. It's also often cited as one of the best memoirs ever written. Yeah. But his work is very dark and gothic and violent, and so that's often why he doesn't get as much.
Yes.
But he's very rough and gruff kind of guy. Yeah. He's very intimidating.
Yes.
But I think we got along fine. For some of the writers, I would spend I spent the entire weekend with Barry Hannah and Willie Morris.
Oh goodness. How was that? Barry Hannah was a wild man too.
It was back when he was a very wild man.
Okay. Are these stories you can tell in public?
Willie and Barry, unfortunately, are long gone.
Yes.
In fact, my photograph of Barry Hannah is the one that his family really loves, and they used it on the cover of his last large book of collected stories,
Wow.
which was published about 4 or 5 years ago.
It's been very recently.
Yeah, very recently. So what am I telling a story about now?
No, just you got any Barry Hannah stories?
That weekend. Oh yeah, that's so. Like I said, Barry was pretty wild, so me and Barry and Willie Morris, who is a legendary editor at Harper's Magazine, and I mentioned that fact that I knew Willie Morris and impressed them that I knew Willie Morris. So we went out to some bar, and he was, Barry drank way too much.
Yes.
So he got into an actual fight with somebody in a bar.
Just somewhere in Oxford, or
In
did y'all
Oxford.
go to Memphis?
No, in Oxford, and they were pushing each other, and oh my God, and he actually said to Willie, he says, "I'm gonna go get my gun," And I went, "Oh my God!" And Willie talked him down from. He was a wild man back then.
Yeah.
And so, luckily, but then I spent a couple of nights with him, and less. It was less dramatic after that, but that was the most dramatic thing that happened.
Well, a bit more genteel while staying in that same state.
Yes.
How was a photograph of Miss Eudora, who's here on the cover of the
Oh,
book?
Miss Eudora. Well, the thing about this, it's and the subtitle of the book is for a reason. It's called "An Unlikely Journey to the Soul of Southern Literature," and because it is unlikely, and it is a journey, because Eudora Welty and Robert Penn Warren. I wrote Eudora for 2.5 years. I wrote her first letter. She says no. Then later I wrote another letter, and I sent her some pictures, and then over the next 2.5 years, as I knew more people, and then and met more writers, who were friends, like. Reynolds Price was a friend of Walker Percy, so of Eudora Welty, and so he interceded for me and said, "Oh, he's an okay guy," but she still didn't say yes. And Tyler, who I was friends with, I photographed her and then would, when I was in Baltimore, stop by and see her. She was a friend of her, and she interceded for me. And then Louis Rubin was my mentor, and who's I noticed is on the wall in your building here.
Yes.
He interceded for me, and I went to 2 conferences to plead with her to see me. So it took all that time for me to finally get her to say yes.
To go to Jackson.
To go to
photograph her
Jackson
in her home.
and see her, because I knew I wouldn't have much of a book if I didn't have at least her. Robert Penn Warren was very much on board, but I had to write him. We wrote 40 letters back and forth till I finally got him, okay, come to Connecticut on this day. And he is one of my literary heroes. My God. I mean, All the King's Men is just a freaking masterpiece, is it not?
No, I always tell this story when I talk about that book. The first time I ever read that novel, I was sitting on the Horseshoe as I was finishing it. And as you might remember, the last word of that book is the word time.
Uh-huh.
And so I finished that book and I read the last word. And as I'm reading the last word, it says time. The carillon on the Horseshoe, the bells start chiming. And it was this like magnificent serendipitous moment where it just felt like the literary gods just were speaking to me and pointing me into this moment, and the moment pointing back out at me as if, and it almost kind of felt like I was, I was Jack Burton myself, kind of in the story, but outside of the story, kind of participating. It just gave me chills, man. Every time I think about that novel, I think about that one moment, my actual experience of reading the novel, which is a novel in some ways is about writing, is about storytelling, is about understanding these things itself as much as it's about politics and all these other things. It's really a book about the experience of writing and reading and the way in which that becomes a way to mediate our own experience of life. And it was like this one auditory cue that just pegged me to that. And I can't see the spine of the novel on my own shelf or at a bookstore without being back in that moment. And I still just get chills about it.
That's what great writing can do. Is it? So anyway, I was so happy to meet him and spend the day with him. But Eudora, she was as gracious as she can be, the picture on here. This is in her, I guess, where her telephone was. She didn't have a cell phone. This was before, and so she hated being in this room. So she, when I saw this mirror and this scene here with the light coming this way, I thought that would be a great place to take a picture. But this is her most unpleasant room, and she told me so. But this is what spoke to me, and I took the picture. But she was very sweet, and when she took me to lunch at a cafe in downtown Jackson, and she drove a Pontiac Skylark with a Hearst shifter, like it was like came up from the floorboards, that. And she told me, she says, well, the only reason I bought this car was because it was the only one on the lot that had a straight shift, because I don't like automatic.
How about that? Good for her. Good for her.
So I mean, after all of that back and forth and begging and pleading, she was very nice, and even nicer with her was it's part of this story. I tell this. This is a Shaggy Dog story, and I tell it in this 15,000 word essay that starts this book. But Louis Rubin, as I said, he was my mentor, and he wanted to do this book for LSU Press.
Now, for people who might not know, Louis Rubin was longtime professor of English at Chapel Hill.
Yes.
And he is one of the most significant scholars of Southern literature, especially the first generation.
Yeah.
He and a man named Alan Jacobs edited a book called Southern Renaissance,
Right.
which one might see as the beginning of Southern literary studies. And he was a really, really significant force in Southern letters from Charleston. But so that's the context if any listeners don't know who Rubin is. But this is so he was a mentor to you then.
He was a mentor, and so his idea was to get somebody else to write the text for this book. It was going to be photographs with some text, you know.
Okay.
And I was going to take the photographs. So he basically got one of his former students from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, to agree to write the text. And so for the next 2 years, over 2 years, while I was taking pictures, this person was supposed to write the text. Well, 2 years go by, and he leaves the country on a Fulbright, and he says, and when I took Welty's picture, that was sort of like, okay, I have now got what I need. At this time I had taken 50, 60, 70 photographs. So we asked him, "Are you done?" And he left the country with nothing. He hadn't written a word.
Wow.
And I really hadn't taken any notes that much. I'd taken some. A few of them, like Walker Percy, I had used, my time with him to write an article for the L.A. Times and things like that. But I really hadn't. I didn't think it was my job to write the text. Well, so at that point, what I had to do was go back and interview all the writers I'd photographed formally, so I'd have something to write from, because,
And this is months, or in some cases even years.
Yeah, and a couple of them had died, and all that. So, anyway, I did that, which took a while, and then I transcribed all these notes. But then what I had to do was take these notes and sort of write a fiction about when they said them to me. So I took these quotes, and then I had them, like, if they were sitting at, like, she was Welty sitting here, and I might have her. She picked up something, and she said this to me. So it's fiction. So it's fiction and nonfiction. And then I had to send my stories to these famous authors.
You have to send a short story to
I have to
Eudora
send
Welty.
a
Imagine
fiction,
doing that.
a fiction short story to Eudora Welty and have her edit it.
That ain't intimidating in the least.
No. So Robert Penn Warren, all of them, I had to send my writing, Donald Justice, who was a poet, a great poet. He wrote me, and he said, when you read his and sent it back, he liked it. He said, you should be writing fiction, because I just made up the situation around these quotes, so it fit within the context of the photograph. And Welty was the same way. She did not say anything about it. She just made a few edits and said, "This is fine." So
wonderful. So this is amazing, because we started out talking about this, just about goofing around, talking about lying and telling the truth and all these kind of things, just in a sort of goofy way. And then you moved to this thing you talked about in graduate school. Bill Fox said, you should take photographs instead of writing.
Right.
But then taking photographs made you write.
It did.
And I guess the last thing I want to ask you about this then, do you think your photographs, and this is, again, me, not a photographer, I can't even take something on my phone very well. I can't, I have to have my 10-year-old daughter tell me how to do selfies right, when I'm trying to do stuff.
Yeah.
So when you're taking photographs, are these are you trying to tell a story? And again, I look at this and what you just said about Welty. This is her least favorite room with the mirror behind her, and I'm looking at her. She's kind of looking down and off to the side, kind of slightly out of frame, and then the thing that you see directly in, more or less the center is the back of her head, right? And so there's this kind of duality of her,
Right.
And again, I've read her work, quite a bit, and I know her work fairly well, and so I'm just reading on to this photograph things from her work that I'm seeing here. When you are taking these photographs, as you became more practiced, did you eventually feel that taking these photographs of these authors was making you into a storyteller yourself?
That's a good question. Yes. Well, it gave me stories to tell.
Yes.
Yes, it gave me stories to tell. A very good friend of mine who actually went with me on a couple of these shoots when I shot some of these early folks. She said, maybe it was because I was at that point very inexperienced at shooting portraits, doing portraits. I didn't really know how to set people up, but she said that when you were in front of them, you disappeared and you weren't there, and it was just the camera, and so maybe it was my naivete, my lack of experience, the fact that I wasn't a serious, wasn't like Avedon coming to photograph them. It put them at ease, and that kind of was what came through with the photographs. That's the reason that they are able to look so intently at the camera and not me.
Yeah. Well, I'm in love with this with these photographs and the book and the exhibit. And again, want to encourage everybody who's here in Central South Carolina to go out and go to this exhibit there at the Koger Center for the Arts, up in the gallery, up on the second floor, the second floor there in the Koger Center. Please do go check it out. It's wonderful. We're going to leave a link in the show notes to where you can pick up the book, a copy of the book. I cannot recommend it enough. The photographs are wonderful, and the stories are absolutely fantastic themselves.
Oh, well.
So, Mark Morrow, man, I am so over the moon thrilled we got a chance to talk this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I got to get on back to Alexandria, Virginia, where I live now.
Well, I do hope you have a safe drive back, and thank you for taking a little time with us here this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark.
That was our take on the South. Let us know yours. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at U of SC South. Be sure to click and subscribe. Take on the South is produced by the Institute for Southern Studies and the McCausland College of Arts and Sciences at the University of South Carolina. Special thanks to Professor Dave Garner of the University of South Carolina School of Music for composing our soundtrack. Tune in next time for another Take on the South.